Hello again, and welcome to the last lecture for this week, which is Backup and Recovery. Now, Backup and Recovery has changed a little bit in Windows 10. Older versions of Windows had a whole separate backup system that you would configure to start at a certain time. It would back up certain files, things like that. It's the same more or less in Windows 10. It looks different, and so I'll show you how you would go about configuring what they're calling file history now, which is essentially backing stuff up. So if I go to Settings, so Windows and Settings, and then scroll down to Update and Security. In here we have the backup area. So in the backup area, we have a possibility of setting up a backup for file history. What we need to do is we need to connect an external, some other drive. Now, I take that back. It doesn't have to be external. It needs to be something other than the system drive. So we add a separate drive, and we say this is where we are going to store our file history. So if I click right here on add a drive, it's going to look, I've got this volume E here. So we're going to store backups on volume E. So automatically back up my files. What's going to happen here is every so often, and we'll go into some options here to see what every so often actually means. Every so often, it is going to go through and back up my files. So as you can see here, every hour is what it's set to right now, and keep my files forever. Now, what this is going to do, every hour, it's going to stop and see what files I have, and it's going to change them. It's going to take them and save them in here. Now, I'm going to keep these backups at this point forever. I could, if I choose, say, no, only keep them until I need more space. So basically, when I run out of my 6.8 gigs of space, it'll start overwriting the oldest stuff, or for a month, or for 3 months. And after that, it just deletes the files and doesn't care anymore. I can also set how long. I could have it as little as 10 minutes, excuse me, or I could have it happen every day. So every hour is fine. And then which folders get saved? Well, right now, just my user profile folder. If I wanted to add other folders, maybe I have a documents folder or something, I just click here, add a folder, and I can select which of these extra folders I want. Let's say if I go local C drive, for some reason I want my universal print driver folder saved. So I say OK, and now it is going to, there we go, on top of all my profile folders that you see here, it's also going to back up my universal print driver folder. Why? I don't know. I can specifically say, though, in my profile, don't back up this folder. Maybe I've got a folder full of pictures that, like, maybe not just my pictures folder, some other folder. And I don't want those backed up. That's just a place I'm storing stuff temporarily, and I don't want it to take up space. I can exclude a specific folder, do the same thing I did for adding folders. Okay, so by using this allows us to make very quick, very simple backups of the files in our profile. And ideally, you're going to have this on a separate drive, obviously, because if something goes wrong with the main drive and you're backing it up on the main drive, well, you just lost whatever you tried to back up, right? So, okay, so that is very briefly how we use file history. Now, the neat thing about file history is this has real-time, immediate benefits. You may revert to earlier versions of your files just when this is running. You can do it right in the File Explorer. So let me just go to where my Universal Print Driver folder is, because I've just added this now. This is part of the backup. If I right-click and get properties of this folder, inside here, now that this is set up for backup, there's a previous versions tab. If I click on this, this is going to tell me, yeah, I haven't made any changes, it hasn't backed up. It is going to show me where I have earlier versions of the file. So if I were to go in and make changes to some of this folder, like I'm going to create a new text document there. So I have now made a change to this folder. If I go back into my backups, let me get back there. Come on, back up, please. I'm not sure what happened there. Okay. So when I go to my backups here, comes up. Go to more options. There. So my data has not backed up yet. Let me back it up right now. But before I do that, I'm going to exclude whole bunch of folders. Now, you know what? This won't take very long. I'll back everything up. I hardly have anything on here. So I will click back up. It is going to take some time. It's going to go through all of the stuff that I have set in all these folders, and it's going to create a backup on the E drive. Now, this is going to take a little while. I'll pause. I say that it just finished. Wow, that's fast. Okay, so it's finished. So that is now, I have 281 megabytes backed up. Okay, so if let me come back here. I now have this backed up. I have my HP Universal Print Driver folder backed up. If I go to the E drive, I'll actually be able to see the file history. This is the stuff that was backed up. Now, this is not encrypted or safe in any way. This is just stuff. This is just data that I have. Notice I have my Universal Print Driver on the C drive, and then inside Users, User X, I have all my folders. It's just flat out the files that I have on my machine copied over to this machine, copied over to this drive. I'm sorry, it's been a long week. So if now that I have that set, if I go and make changes, let me go back to my Universal Print Driver, and I delete a new document. I'm just going to delete it completely. And then I'll even empty the recycle bin, make sure it's completely gone. Okay, so I no longer have that. If I want to restore that, if I want to restore whatever was deleted, I can right-click on my print driver, my Universal Print Driver folder, go into Properties, go to Previous Versions. I now have a previous version. I have a backed up version. If I want to see what's in it, I can open it and take a look at what's inside. In File History. And notice this is what was in history, the file folder, and then my new text document that I created. If I want to restore that, now I can just click on this Restore button, and it'll restore that folder, this file, that I deleted. So click on that. It's going to go through, yes, and we'll skip the files that are, this is saying I have a bunch of files that already exist. I don't want to replace them. I'll keep those. I'll just skip those and let them just create the one that I deleted. So there it goes. It's finished. I should, if I look in here, I now have my new text document back. So that's what file history does. It gives you an online way, basically online, ready to work at any time, way to access files and access your backups. So this isn't like the old days where you had a backup that you had to go find, you had to load, you may have had to shut the system down, completely restore. You can do this while the system is running. Unless this is a serious system file that you're trying to restore, you'll never really need to shut the system down and go through any work. You can just find the previous version that you want and restore it, as long as you have been continuously successfully backing up your files, which ideally the file history should have been doing for you. Now that is for user documents, for your files. Now, as far as the system goes, the system also has a way of keeping track of changes and being able to roll back or revert to earlier versions of a system if something goes wrong. Now, Windows itself has built in this kind of safeguard. So if we go to Control Panels, let me get into the Control Panels here for a second, and go to System and Security, then System, and then System Protection. If I go in here, I have what's called the System Restore. System Restore allows us to restore the system to an earlier state, to where there was a restore point. Now, restore points happen when the system does something large, when it has a major update, when it installs a program. When something like that occurs, it creates a restore point. That restore point basically saves the computer state as it is before the change is made. That way, if something happens, if the update goes wrong, if the install is corrupt, if you somehow get a virus somewhere along the way, you can go back to the system restore point, which was before the changes were made, and your system will be as it was before you did whatever the thing you did that broke your computer. Now, the system will do this whenever a major event takes place, but you may also create your own restore point. Like maybe you're about to go mucking around in the registry or something, and you want to make sure that anything you do, whatever you're going to do, you'll be able to roll back and get to an earlier restore point. And to do that, you need to make sure that whichever drive you're going to be working with, you have this system protection turned on. Notice by default, it's turned off because it takes some work and some space on the drive, so it'll be slowing your computer down a tiny bit to have it work. So to configure it, let's select the system disk, let's configure, and then here we get to turn on system protection, which allows us to create restore points. We can also adjust how much space is going to be used for system protection. Right now it's at 0. When I turn it on, I will actually be able to set how much % of my drive I want to use for system protection. This tells me, like, say I make it, let's make like around 5 gigabytes. So I am going to set 5 gigabytes of my drive aside for settings and old restore points, old system data that I'll be able to recover if something were to happen. And I can make this as little or as small or as large as I want it to be. Okay, so if I apply this, if I do this, okay, now notice system disk is set on. So I now have system restore protection. So if I wanted to create a system restore point myself, I could just go down here, click create, and then explain, so my restore point, how about point? There we go. Create a system restore point, and it is going to take a snapshot. That's what it's doing right now. It's taking a snapshot of my entire system as it is right now. From this point forward, yay, created successfully. This point forward, if I ever need to revert back to the system as it is right now, I can go to System Restore, and it will give me a list of restore points. And I can say this is the time I want to go back to. They'll give you the date, and hopefully there's a description of what happens. And sometimes if it's like an update, it won't say manual, it'll say automatic, it will say system update, or whatever. But now that it's turned on, it will actually keep track of these things, and it will actually create restore points when we do things like install programs, install drivers, things like that. So this is a nice way that the system has to save or protect yourself, protect your system files, is in case something happens, you'll be able to recover the way your system was before whatever damage occurred. And that will do it for this moment, this lecture. That's what I'm trying to say. So that's going to do it for this lecture on backup and recovery. So this week we talked about a few things. We talked about performance monitoring. We talked about bottlenecks and the resource monitor. And we talked about backup and recovery options in Windows 10. Okay, so that is it for this week. Next week, we're going to talk about Intune, Microsoft Intune, which is a constantly changing way to manage devices across multiple devices across an entire company. I say ever-changing because what is in your book is out of date. It was only written a year and a half ago, and it's out of date. It doesn't work. And so we won't be using the text from the book. We'll be using online resources from Microsoft to work with Intune. Okay, have a good week, and I will talk to you soon.